Bryan Kohberger's attorneys and Idaho State prosecutors are fighting over a witness who goes all the way back to the O.J. Simpson case. What?
Is bringing up complicated feelings on past trials really the way to go? I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm attorney Andrew Myers.
Andrew, this is crazy. Did you ever expect something like this to happen?
Well, you never know in the Kohberger case. Ever since the early days when it took them 6 weeks to find a person, then they had the probable cause affidavit, which objectively, frankly speaking, makes no sense. You never know what to expect. And I expect that there will be more unexpected in this case. But in this case, the big news at this point that actually came out kind of in the footnotes, but it's kind of percolating to the top of public attention, is that Bryan Kohberger's attorneys want to bring in an expert who goes all the way back to the O.J. Simpson case, which goes way back to the mid-90s, and they called it the case of the century. So the case of the last century is kind of linking up with the case of this century, although we're kind of early in the century, and one just never really knows what might happen. So here is an article that appeared in the Daily Mail, and it's an interesting article. The headline is, with all due respect to the Daily Mail, there it is. The headline is, Bryan Kohberger hires O.J. Simpson defense witness for Idaho murders trial. Quadruple homicide suspect Bryan Kohberger has hired a forensic pathologist who worked on the O.J. Simpson case to testify in his defense at the murder trial of 4 University of Idaho students. Kohberger, of course, is accused of the brutal slayings of Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogen, and Kaylee Goncalves in their off-campus house in November of 2023. As we know, and we covered on this channel earlier in this month, a judge scheduled his trial to start on July 30th, 2025. Now, that's the jury selection date. The trial itself is slated to start August 11th of 2025. And that's after the state Supreme Court in Idaho, of course, agreed to move it 300 miles from the small town of Moscow, Idaho, where the ruthless killing occurred, to the state capital of Boise. So recent court filings show his defense team has brought on renowned forensics expert Dr. Barbara C. Wolfe to testify remotely at a hearing scheduled for November 7th. Wolfe is currently the medical examiner of Florida's 5th and 24th districts, which include Citrus, Hernando, Lake, Marion, Seminole, and Sumter counties. She has worked on several high-profile cases. There, of course, is Mr. Kohberger hiring the forensic pathologist who worked on the O.J. Simpson case to testify in his defense. There, of course, are the 4 victims of the November 13th, 2022 tragic shooting. And we get back to the newspaper article. Notably, this expert we're talking about today worked on O.J. Simpson's defense team while he was on trial for the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman in 1995. At the time, Wolfe worked as the director of anatomic pathology at Albany Medical College and examined at least one of the gloves from the infamous case. And we're going to see one of the gloves in a little bit. Remember the famous line, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit.
Oh my gosh, that's generational.
The late Johnny Cochran. That was like, I think if anybody remembered anything from that case, I think that was it. OJ. And, you know, it's kind of like a little, at the time, I thought
hand doesn't fit in there.
Yeah, it was like a little kid who didn't want to wear his gloves. So when mommy was trying to put on his gloves, he made his hand go big so it didn't. That's what I thought back then, but I was in the minority. I understand that.
It reminds me of when we're out of medium gloves at a hair salon and everybody has to wear the small gloves because the big ones are way too big.
Oh, Oh, yeah.
It's just like, oh, his head is just a small period that day. My hands are swollen. I can't get it in. It's not possible.
Yeah, so we're going to take a look at that in just a little bit. Her team criticized the doctor who conducted the autopsies and suggested that the evidence pointed to a later time of death than that that did align with Simpson's alibi. So her testimony was very crucial, that contradicted what the prosecution was saying, and it kind of aligned with Simpson's alibi. So Simpson was cleared of charges after the high-profile trial that captivated the world. According to our biography, Wolfe was also involved in the 1991 exhumation of civil rights leader Medgar Evans. In 1995, she was involved in the exhumation of the bodies of 5 children from one family in New York who were presumed to have passed of sudden infant death syndrome way back in 1965 to 1971. And her role in the reevaluation led to the conviction of the mother for the suffocation of the infants. The state of Idaho, in this case, getting back to the Kohberger case, objected to her testimony, claiming it will not help the trier of fact to understand the evidence or to determine a fact in issue according to court filings. However, on October 18th, Administrative District Judge Stephen Hippler granted the defense motion to have, now this isn't accurate actually, remember that date, October 18th. According to the newspaper, it says that the judge granted the defense motion to have Wolfe testify. That's not entirely true. So keep that in the back of your head. We're going to come back to that. Kohberger's defense attorneys argued to have the case moved to Boise due to the extensive media coverage. We've been through all of this. And this is Barbara Wood, the expert that goes all the way back to the OJ days, and they want to bring her into this trial. Who really is Barbara Wolfe, you ask? Well, here is her website. This is her website. And her board certifications are in forensic pathology, anatomic pathology, hematopathology, that's issues in the blood. Barbara Wolfe, MD of Leesburg, Florida, combines the roles of doctor, scientist, and detective in her job as a forensic pathologist, hands-on, round-the-clock work that involves everything from performing autopsies to providing expert testimony. Dr. Wolfe is a Phi Beta Kappa and Alpha Omega Alpha graduate from Boston University's 6-year program in liberal arts and medical education. She began her career in forensic pathology in upstate New York, and we just mentioned Albany, where she started a private consulting practice providing forensic pathology services to law enforcement, coroners, district attorneys. She also serves as the chair of the National Association of Medical Examiners, Inspection and Accreditation Committee, as the chair of the Florida Medical Examiners Commission. So it would seem to me that if the state of Idaho is going to contest Dr. Wolfe on the basis that she's uncredentialed, it would seem to me that her credentials, her background, her training, her expertise, her experience, those areas that a court looks at as to whether or not someone is allowed to be quote unquote an expert, it would seem to me that that's been pretty much proven. And she's testified in a lot of cases going way back to OJ.
Yeah, I mean, as grotesque as it sounds, they started talking about the exhumation of, bodies in all these cases, and got to be pretty credentialed to be taking bodies out of the ground. So she's got a long list of credits. She knows she seems pretty decorated
person to do that. I was listening to some testimony in a different trial, in the Sarah Boone trial, from the forensic pathologist who, had the unfortunate task of looking at George Torres post-mortem. And, it takes a special kind of a person to do that. Someone's got to do it. Takes a lot of education, training, experience to not only do that, but then be able to testify about it on the stand. But you don't remember OJ, do you?
I was not even conscious of thought. I was a little baby, and I grew up obviously having heard of the OJ case, but I'm not like you and most of our audience where you guys have actual recollections of it happening in the media. I've
Now, that
never
was
saw
unfair of me to ask you, and we talked about this before. So I've been a really bad boy in a couple of ways today. Some we can't even say. But
you make it sound worse than it is.
I know. So the OJ trial, if it hadn't have been for the OJ trial, we wouldn't have all of the YouTubers and the podcasters and the true crimers and all the stuff that we have now, because the OJ trial was one of the very first trials that was pretty much covered live, gavel to gavel, by Court TV. God bless them. Sometimes we take a shot at some of the things they do. But they started a cable channel, and that's all they did. And back then people said, oh, nobody wants to watch that. Well, guess what? They did. And the O.J. Simpson trial came along, and it was fascinating. A lot of us were unable to get our work done because we just watched. And he had a dream team of attorneys, like 25 or 30 attorneys. Correct me down below if I don't remember. Of some of the best attorneys in the nation. Barry Scheck was like the DNA guy. The late Johnny Cochran was the real go-get-em litigation attorney. F. Lee Bailey was one of the attorneys. They even had Alan Dershowitz sitting back in Harvard watching the whole thing on TV. This was before the whole streaming thing. He was watching, and they had a special phone line into him telling them, things that they had to do and questions that they had to ask in order to preserve the record for appeal. So that was my point, is that case, the OJ case, was one of the first that just really grabbed national attention. The Sam Shepard trial back in the 50s was big, but it wasn't streamed on live internet because there was no internet back then. So anyhow, remember I said that the issue of whether or not she's going to be allowed was incorrectly reported in that newspaper article.
I believe it said October 18th was the date.
Yeah. So, oops. Okay, we'll do it that way. All right. See the date at the top, October 18th. Anna Meyer, no relation, is the clerk. Order permitting remote participation at hearing for defense witness. Okay, if that's all you read, you'd go to the typewriter or the word processor and say, okay, she was allowed. But no, the court having before it defendant's motion for order permitting remote participation at hearing for defense witness and good cause appearing. Now, therefore, it is hereby ordered that defense witness Barbara C. Wolfe, MD, shall be allowed to participate remotely at the motions hearing currently scheduled for November 7th, 2024 at 9 a.m. Get the dun ready.
Dun, dun, dun.
If permitted by the court to provide testimony.
Dun,
So they've said, here is Judge Stephen Hippler saying, if we're going to let her testify, if we're going to allow her to testify, then she can do it remotely, because the court, of course, is in Boise, Idaho, and she is in Florida, a distance of at least 2,500 miles. I'm just
a little
guessing.
far.
I don't know.
Not a quick drive.
Why make Dr. Wolfe fly in if she's not going to be, the issue of whether or not she is going to be allowed to testify is not finalized yet. My guess is that they will allow it because, this is important testimony with respect to the issue of the DP. And so my guess is that they certainly will allow her. But the prosecution, and we know that somebody in the prosecution is watching us, the prosecution will argue that it has not been allowed at this time. So one of the arguments that the state had made is that, this testimony of Dr. Wolfe was general, it had legal conclusions, and it's the court's job to arrive at legal conclusions. Witnesses are only supposed to testify as to facts and expert opinions, but with respect to legal conclusions, which is a whole different kettle of fish, the state was saying, she's improper. She can't testify.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. That's just that's what they said. So,
But I guess like my thought is if she's talking in something in her own field, if it's not necessarily law, then it should be allowed. But at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter what's right or what's wrong. Sometimes it feels like it's just like almost like they just go through the classic motions, because it's just like, if you're going to do a good job, you have to fight back against the witness, whether or not you agree with it, I would say.
right. Well, to any argument that she didn't have enough specifics, and there are different motions, and granted, there are different motions, 13 of them filed in one day. But if anybody thinks that her testimony was not specific enough, and Lainey, you're the expert, so you tell me when I can't read this anymore. I want to go to this affidavit of Barbara C. Wolfe, the forensic pathologist. Tell me if this is not specific enough, and tell me when I have to stop. I'm an adult over the age of 18, and I have personal knowledge of the facts set forth in this affidavit. Okay, remember, she's a forensic pathologist, famous one. I have been a licensed MD since 1980 and have been a practicing pathologist since 1985. I am the district medical examiner for District 5 and the interim district medical examiner for District 24 in the state of Florida. I have been board certified in forensic pathology since 1994. I currently serve as the chair of the Florida Medical Examiners Commission. I also privately contract as an expert. I have been asked to address the subject of conscious pain and suffering experienced by individuals who are executed by firing squads.
So,
yeah.
And one of the things that Andrew, we were talking about this, and it's hard because I want to hear everybody's opinions, but at the same time, it's hard if you're not a YouTuber, is we can't even, like, obviously we come here in a way wanting to present the news to you guys, but especially with this document in particular, YouTube does not like talking about any E words, any M words, any D words. So I'm thinking execution is fine for today, but we'll have to see how the monetization goes. I do want to say thank you to the members who support this channel, fighting through our demonetized videos. But
yeah, we had some problems with who was the YouTuber that was the all gung ho family person, and then they found her doing horrible things to her kids.
Ruby Frank.
Yeah, so we got demonetized for that. We somehow got away with reading the P. Diddy stuff. But if we had read the P. Diddy indictment word for word, that would have been a huge problem. But anyhow, so she is talking about how the issue here is the 8th Amendment prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. And I would think the DP is cruel and unusual punishment without any further thought. I mean, isn't that like the ultimate thing, is to remove someone from the face of the earth? And to me, that's cruel and unusual punishment. And if you thought that, oh, no. We're not going to read this whole affidavit. I will put a link down in the comment section because it goes a great deal into the details of what happens in a firing squad, assuming that the shooters, number 5, are competent marksmen. The condemned individual will be shot in the chest. And it goes on to tell us what happens when you're shot in the chest. So, again, I'm not going to read it, but it goes into a great deal of detail. So how anyone could say that her testimony is all legal conclusions, it goes into a lot of, graphic detail on what happens when that happens. So anyhow,
now I have a question though, because now she has this testimony. Is this what she's going to be talking about if she calls in on Zoom?
Yes.
So my question then, because she's saying it's cruel and unusual punishment, can they do anything about that?
Well, that's the argument. The argument that they brought up. Remember, we did an episode on, by the way, we're looking at this expert, Barbara Wolfe, on the screen right there. The issue of the death penalty is being argued on November 7th in the Ada County District Court in Boise, Idaho. So that's the whole issue. And, the state is saying, well, first of all, Kohberger's attorneys, Jay Logston, signed off on 13 motions to strike the death penalty. And then the state came back and said, hey, look, you're arguing appellate issues. If the death penalty is something that's on the books, on the statutes in the state of Idaho, it's something that's valid and something that we are able to include in the case. And they went into a lot of detail. The Kohberger's attorneys did everything they could to argue against all of the aggravating factors. The state came back and said, hey, you're arguing appellate law. And they took a lot of other positions about how the Kohberger attorneys were just plain wrong. So this is the expert that goes all the way back to the O.J. Simpson days. And of course, we all remember O.J., there are the gloves. Look, if the gloves don't fit, you must acquit. And there he is holding...
They clearly don't fit. Look at all that space between his wrists.
And I remember that. Oh, boy, I remember that. And then, I guess I'm showing my age, but I can't hide it anymore. So they want to bring that type of activity into the examination of the forensics in the Bryan Kohberger case. I think these two hold the key to the case, Dylan and Bethany. I really do think that those two hold the keys to the whole case. But this will ratchet up, determining whether or not the DP will be allowed in Bryan Kohberger's case. And of course, we don't know. We just don't know. I mean, it's an interesting issue.
It reminds me a little bit, which is hard because, obviously it's legal and it's supposed to be meant as one of the punishments. But it's those states that have weird laws, you can't walk around your house without any clothes on or something. It's just you're obviously not going to get arrested for that. It's just because something is an option doesn't mean you have to do it. So just because the death penalty is an option. But at the same time, it's hard from a legal perspective where it's just if it's 50 years or up to death and DP, sorry, it's still an option. So they still have to be considering it in the first place.
I've lost count of how many experts have been brought into this case. We had 5 experts just on the issue of, the jury potential pool and what their biases were from the very first and whether or not those biases could be overcome. And the results of those 5 experts were that the venue was moved. The venue was moved from Moscow down to Boise. So now they've got more experts. I've frankly lost track. If anybody knows exactly, you tell me down in the comments. But it's an interesting case. People are saying, look, a lot of money has been spent on this case. Is that right? Some people say the families, have every right to, and the families are a bit upset about the fact that it's taken so long. And other people are saying, we got to do it right the first time. There are a lot of constitutional issues in the case, which we've talked about in prior issues. But in this episode, we just wanted to talk about this expert. It is interesting. Her name has been in the pleadings for a while, but it just seems that all of a sudden now on a slow news week elsewhere, not in true crime, but in a slow news week, people are all of a sudden discovering, we're guilty of it too. We read through the name of Barbara Wolfe. We had read one of the 13 motions mentioning her. And I didn't remember her from the OJ case. I didn't remember her from 30 years ago, but someone at a higher pay scale than me did remember her. And, O.J. Simpson was found not guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Controversial. People question it, but he was found not guilty. Many years later, he was found guilty in a totally different case. But anyhow, so.
Yeah, it is interesting to see how this is going to impact, because the way I was surprised that it would even happen in the first place, because obviously they're a very accredited person. But at the same time, with associations to a case that so many people have conflicted emotions about, it was definitely an interesting choice.
Yeah, it was an interesting choice. And, there he is, Bryan Kohberger. That is his new mugshot that was taken after he was moved from Moscow down to the Ada County Sheriff's Office. And It's interesting. There's always something new with this case. I think you asked me earlier, will there be more huge, unforeseen developments? Yes. My application to get additional information is still pending. Remember, I talked about a previous episode about how the court had indicated that people can apply. They didn't say they were going to grant these applications, but people could apply for unsealing of documents. And so I filled out an application. They told us what form to use and where to submit it. So I've done that. I have submitted my form asking for specific items. And when I get them, or more likely I don't get them, I will tell everybody in our audience. And there's some other things that I want to apply to get too. Since I filled that out, 2 weeks ago, I think, since I filled that out, there have been some other developments in the case. And I just don't understand why some of the things have been sealed. The motion that Ann Taylor brought up for specific voir dire questions and outlawing the magic question. Remember the magic question?
With our rabbits and hats?
Yeah, I couldn't. People like that. Some of our viewers liked the fact that you had a rabbit in your hat and were able to do that. So I have submitted a request for certain discovery materials, and I've also now thought about it. And I just don't understand why the motion by the defense to exclude the quote unquote magic question and for following a certain procedure in voir dire. As an attorney who used to do a lot of trial work, I want to know why that motion was sealed immediately. A lot of times the motions, there's a motion to seal and the court comes out in due time and says, well, yes, we will seal it. This one said sealed immediately. So I'm going to request just the motion because, I ran through the case law that I found. I'd love to see their case law and compare notes and find out what that's all about. But so anyhow, that's kind of my closing thought, that there's so much going on behind the scenes of this case that we just don't know. And from a legal point of view, this is the name of our podcast is about the law. I'd like to know what's going on. I really would. Because you know what? A lot of people come on here and they say, well, I know from what I see, he's innocent. Oh, he's definitely guilty. You don't know that. We don't know that. We don't know because so much of it is hidden. So anyhow, any closing thoughts on your side?
I'm interested to see how it plays out. Like I said, a lot of people have a lot of conflicted feelings about the OJ case. So it's weird seeing them even want to bring that back up, kind of, unearth some more dirt. It's just like, I feel like, I don't know, it's a little scary. I mean, obviously he wasn't found guilty. So there was some positive results for him in that situation. But now, with the fact that we have the internet and so many people have heard about everything, I'm curious to see how this affects things. But I appreciate everybody who watches our channel and has things to say and comments nice things.
Yeah, back during the OJ case, I do remember it. I do remember because I just got out of law school, and it was on TV. That's how we got all of our stuff back then, on TV, radio, and in the newspapers. And I was an avid reader of newspapers. I'm one of those guys that would go down to the store on a Sunday morning and get 3 or 4 Sunday papers and just sit there and read them. In the good weather, go to the beach and read them and try not to let the pages fly all over the beach. But so that's how we consumed news back then. We would get the newspapers, we would watch TV, and that's how we consume news. And it, there was a little bit of a delay. Not that much with court TV. That was the first, like I said before, that was the first big, huge court TV case. But now it's instantaneously. So we've watched and covered and done lives of some of the Kohberger hearings. The same with Karen Reed. I've been kind of obsessed this week. I've been kind of watching the Sarah Boone case. That case has been crazy. So the point I'm trying to make is that now we get this stuff instantaneously. We don't have to wait for the newspaper to be delivered at 6 o'clock or at night, or to get, the Sunday papers were always the real gem of the newspaper business, because on a Sunday they would, tell you what happened that week. And so those were great newspapers. Now they've gone by the boards and they're about that thick because, people don't consume the news anymore and most of the ads aren't in there anymore. But anyhow, all right, okay. So thank you very much. We will cover this as time goes on, and have a good one.
Whether you are in the grocery store, the gas station, or anywhere else, please remember to be kind to people. You don't know what they're going through. And the same goes for our comments section. We want you to comment, but be nice, be kind, be positive if you can. And thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Have a good one.